I'm glad you've decided to join us here for our next video from Howard Piano Industries. I'm Steve Howard, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion about piano tuning theory. Today we're going to be describing what temperament is, along with equal temperament, and what that is, and a little bit about why pianos need to be tuned in equal temperament. Now, when we look at when we first start to tune a piano, we start usually with one octave. Okay, we're gonna different tuners will use different starting points as far as their octave, but we're going to use from A3, which is here, up to A4, which is there. Okay, so there we've got the A below middle C, which is A3, and the A above middle C, which is A4. Okay, and basically what temperament is the equal distribution, or the distribution of the different half steps within that octave. Okay, so like for between two different A's, okay, we want that to sound pretty pure. Now, we talked in previous videos about what beats are, partials, coincident partials, and how those create beats. But we're going to start here with our octave A to A as being beatless or no beats between those two notes. Okay, now when we divide the half steps within an octave, what we have to do is we have to divide them equally, or theoretically equally, so that all the intervals sound good within the framework of how equal temperament would work. Now, if we tuned all of the intervals on a piano, which isn't theoretically possible, if we tuned them all to be what would be considered beatless, or with no beats, it theoretically wouldn't be possible, because if you tune, like, for example, A to E with no beats in it, okay, when we got to E to A, you would have a faster beat than what you really want. Okay, so you kind of what's called temper the octave, so that all the beats sound good. Okay, and especially as you go outside of that octave, so that all the intervals sound acceptable within what's considered best practice. So and we're going to use what's called equal temperament. Some temperaments don't distribute the half steps equally, and they favor that some intervals, maybe say fifths or fourths, are more pure than others, which are going to put other intervals, like say major thirds or minor thirds, not sounding as well as they could as if you were an equal temperament. And there's different opinions about which type of temperament should be used, but I think most tuners and most musicians go with equal temperament as acceptable. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, I'm going to use for an example the different types of intervals. We talked about major seconds, minor thirds, major thirds in our first tuning theory video, and talked about those different intervals. But basically, we've got perfect fourths, perfect fifths, and octaves. All should be sounding either pure, which in the case of perfect octaves, or very slow beat. Okay, so like, for example, a perfect fifth is going to beat at about one beat per second, for example. Okay, and actually, if when we talk about intervals, we're going to be referring to wide and narrow intervals. Okay, and what that means is if we tuned a perfect fifth without beats, okay, we want perfect fifths are actually tuned a little bit narrow, which means we're going to bring those two notes just a little bit closer than being without a beat, or perfect or beatless. Okay, so which means we would either have to raise the A on the bottom, or lower the E on the top. Okay, now we've already set the A to A for an octave. So if we had this beatless, we would actually lower the E just a slight amount so that it would beat at about 1 beat per second. Okay, fourths, they beat at about 1 beat per second also, except they're wide intervals. Okay, which means if we tuned this perfect fourth beatless, we would need to raise it up just a slight amount to make it beat at about 1 beat per second. Okay, so the fourths and fifths, those are the two intervals that are the slowest beating besides the octaves. Okay, now we also have major thirds and minor thirds, and their corresponding minor sixth and major sixth. And those are going to beat faster. They're going to beat, in this middle section, they're going to beat at about 6-7 beats per second. Okay, which is just pretty fast. But we can use those as test intervals, and we'll get into that as we go into some of our tuning lessons in future videos. But I want to just show you an example. I've tuned this octave to equal temperament for the most part, except for one note. Okay, we're going to use that as an example. I actually tuned the C sharp, which is a major third from A3. Okay, and if you listen to that, I tried to get it beatless, and it should be pretty close to beatless with no beats. So that sounds pretty good, but that's not how you typically hear a major third on a piano. Okay, so like for example, we're going to take A sharp to D, which is another major third. Okay, and that beats quite fast. Okay, and it doesn't sound as good, but that's what our major thirds are going to sound like in equal temperament. And when you hear a piano played, that's what you generally hear from a major third. So those are all major thirds, but that's a major third tuned beatless. Okay, and it's several cents flat. Okay, because major thirds are actually a wide interval. Okay, so they're tuned further apart than beatless. So I made the C sharp flat, or I tuned it down a bit so that it could be beatless. Now, what that also does is that makes the minor sixth from C sharp to the A4 sound better also. That's got a little bit of a beat, but it's much slower than it would normally be in equal temperament. Okay, if we took this minor sixth, that beats much faster. Okay, and can you hear that's pretty pure slow beat, but not what you'd normally hear with a minor sixth. Here's another minor sixth. So those are all minor sixths, and you may not be able to hear the speed of those beats, but you can tell they're not as pure as that. Okay, so but what happens is by tuning this major third pure, it makes the fourths and the fifths sound pretty horrendous. That's a fourth, that's a fifth off of that same C sharp that is tuned incorrectly. Okay, here's a fourth and fifth, and that beats about 1 beat per second. The fifth's just a slight amount slower than the fourth, but that's normal. So we've got fourths and fifths. That's what they should sound like. So you can, as you can see, by tuning this major third without a beat, that puts other intervals off. Okay, so that's what a temperament is just dividing the notes, and we'll get in as we get into the tuning lessons in future videos. We'll show you how to come about in accomplishing that equal temperament. But if you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. But otherwise, our website is howardpianoindustries.com.